Hi, this is Daniel from End Time Country Living. Now, part of country living is finding ways to be more independent from the outside world. And this can be very advantageous as economic or environmental changes happen in the future, or just persecution, where we can be more independent and supply our own needs. Now, one of the main needs is, of course, water and food. Food being one that we can put a lot more effort into and continue to develop our skills, where water would be one where once you develop a system of gathering water, that's usually don't have to worry about it too much. So when you look to grow food on your own and not be so dependent on all the vegetables and fruits that come in through the grocery system, is building compost. Now, compost, what that allows you to do is to feed the soil that your plants are growing into, so your plants will have plenty of nutrition, and it also protects the soil from the sun so it doesn't dry out so fast. And why this is better than going and buying commercially available fertilizers is that it's a lot less expensive in one way, and also you're independent. You can provide it based off of what you have on your own land. You can mow the grass and weeds and compost those in the fall. If you have deciduous trees, you can collect the leaves and grind them up and compost those along with the grass clippings in the summer. So this is a way that you can be a little more independent and provide your garden with good healthy soil, which will give you delicious vegetables that will give you energy and health. And so part of making compost is to find a system that works for you. Now, there's lots of different systems out there, and they work differently in different situations. What works here in our property is to do piles or windrows or different systems like that on the ground in an area where we're not going to be gardening. And what that allows us to do is, while this is breaking down and decomposing, we can be growing and utilizing the space in our garden and not have to try to pile that up in the garden and wonder how we're going to plant something with big piles in the garden taking up space. It also allows us to find places where the sun isn't beating down and drying out the compost. Compost likes to be warm but not dried out. So one of the things that I'm doing today is to turn my compost piles. I do that every month or so, and wet them down. Especially usually in the spring I usually don't have to, but now it's starting to dry out. We're into middle of July, and the soils are drying out very quickly, and so is the compost pile. So one of the things that I like to do is to get out the hose and set it up in a spray pattern over the pile that I'm working on, as I fluff it up over the water to get it all wetted down again. And I'll show you how I'm doing that. So here I have my hose with a spray nozzle on it and a high volume valve. This is a ever-built one from Home Depot that I was able to purchase, and it has a hose adapter on both ends, hose fitting that I got separately. So, and then I just got this kind of a fireman's hose nozzle, fairly inexpensive, but very high volume and adjustable. So that allows me to get a good spray amount on here and set it and just kind of let it sit here and spray over my pile as I go. So I have set the valve in the on position, and then I can adjust this to be whatever spray pattern I want, either a fine jet stream or more of a mist, which I find somewhere in between, not too wide of a pattern. How much wind is in there. And I set this up. So one of the things I like to do is to get my garden cart out here and set it up so that it's sideways beside the pile I'm working on. And that way I can run the hose over the top and set this on the edge here. And it'll sit nicely without me having to hold it. And it sprays over my pile, allowing me to work the pile without having to hang on to or mess with the hose. So here I have my pile that I've been working on here. I have another pile that I just finished here recently. And over here I have where I've been dumping grass clippings, and also have some leaves and sticks and other more carbon material that I've left here from last fall. Now you want to make good compost, important principles to remember are you want to have about a 50-50 mix of green material to brown carbon material. That gives you about a 30-to-1 ratio of nitrogen to carbon. And so it's a little bit confusing, but if you just remember about a 50-50% rule when mixing your green materials and your browns, it usually turn out fairly good. And then you also want to make sure you have enough moisture, but not too much. If it's too soggy wet, it'll become called anaerobic. That means without oxygen. And it'll breed harmful bacteria and ones you don't really want. So you want to make sure it's just damp, but not too wet. So I like to get my 5-tonged fork here and just kind of sprinkle my green grass clippings over the spray pattern here as it's spraying down. Make sure they get nice and damp before I get some brown material. Dig in here and sprinkle this over the top there, put a layer, so I usually enough so that I can't see the previous layer. Mixing is one of the best ways to do it, but that's a lot more work, so just layering on top works just fine. Once I get my layer, I make sure that it's getting nice and wet, and then start layering on the next layer here. And I have to move it back and forth a little bit with the tines of the fork to make sure that it's getting wet. If it's pretty dry like some of this grass is, it's going to take a little bit of time to get it damp. So this is about the size that I usually make my piles. If they come up to just below my waist, I guess. So that's 1, 2, 2.5 feet usually is about as tall as I usually get them, maybe 3 feet. And then I call it good and move on to another pile. It's usually a good height to make them, and you can have all kinds of sticks and other things in there. You can break them up or eventually break down. So that's the basic principle of how you can construct compost piles. Just a mixture of whatever you have available. You can even mix in your kitchen waste, any vegetable peelings or stems, leaves, things like that that you've discarded in your preparation for your food process. You can bring them out here and dump them. Usually I try to put them deep inside a compost pile. Another way that you can, if you have problems with animals getting into them, you can put them in a 5-gallon bucket and fill it up with water to cover whatever you have in there and let it kind of rot down. And that way, once it's rotted down, you can add that to your compost pile, or you can apply that, strain it a little bit, or dump out the liquid and apply that directly as a fertilizer for your garden. So there's different techniques that you can use or strategies that will allow you to have success with feeding the soil that your plants are growing in. Focus more on that because you want to keep the bacteria, all the fungus and everything else in the soil that feeds your plant. You want to feed them because they there's a whole chain of in the soil food web that allows everything to be nourished. Everything is looking to help each other, help the other person, rather than just get for themselves. So that's one thing that we can understand what God has put into nature is the way He is like, to be ever giving to others. And as one gives, it gets from another one. So that's allows us to not be prideful, not to be selfish, but to be always looking to others. And I think of the water that we put into the compost pile. It's very important to have that moisture content, because as it dries out, when it gets to certain dry, it basically stops decomposing. All the bacteria kind of go into dormancy. Some of them will die even, and they won't be breaking down. They're working hard in there to break that organic material down, the fibers and the cells in the plant material, to make food for not themselves, but for others, to break it down into a form that others can use. So I can think of the water of life as in our souls what we need in order to maintain life, to have that continually flowing into us, and that wells up as a spring to not just to take, but to give. It overflows into others. So we share that water of life, which is salvation, and we give it back to others. So in order to be healthy, if we are just taking and never giving, then we are unhealthy spiritually. So just some principles to think about, what God has put into the nature so we can understand spiritual things. All right, see you in the next video. Don't forget to like this video, give me a thumbs up on it, that helps other people find it. And share this video with your friends. Like my Facebook page. And if you're on YouTube, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel in order to get more video updates. All right, bye-bye.